Good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. I'm Gene Paranak. Today is episode 96. Kind of hard to believe. But here we are on March 11th, 2022. Spring is just around the corner. Today we'll catch up really briefly on the remainder of the COVID news. We're just tracking that until the deaths fall, which is happening very quickly. We're thankful for that. After that, I will be joined by MEDC's Mark Ignash, who will be telling us about a unique opportunity for a delegation from the state of Michigan to go together to MD&M West, Medical Device and Manufacturing Trade Show. Mark will be here to tell us all about that. And then after that, today we conclude the Customer Discovery Series, this really important topic. As you're getting ideas to go forward, you gotta know who your market is. You gotta know who the customers are. You have to be aware of this so you can build the right product or service. So we'll be concluding that series today, joined by VanMiddendorp from Spectrum Health Innovations. Eric's been on the show before. He's going to talk about his experience in the industry, his approach to customer and market discovery, and also about a really cool program that Spectrum Health is starting to run to give access to Spectrum clinicians for startups and other commercial entities. So stay tuned for that. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, the COVID news. The last dregs of data here from healthdata.gov from the Michigan report that comes out weekly. In terms of positivity rate now, well down below 10%, down to about 5% after the spike above 30. Deaths have not dropped all the way yet. They are starting to come down, but given what has happened with hospitalizations, we certainly expect that to happen very, very quickly. Like we said, we're just tracking this for completeness to show as the deaths do drop down. There's the hospitalizations down below 20% there. And here's that tracking state trends compared to the winter of 2021. And what you see there is, again, the orange line, hospitalizations, the purple line, cases, the blue line, deaths, down well below the 50% mark of those peaks and continuing to drop from what we can tell. One of the last looks we'll get here at the dashboard from the University of Michigan, currently 23 hospitalized as of March 7th, 7 in the ICU, 3 on ventilators. The data is now aging from Spectrum Health. They didn't actually update it this week, which is just fine. They were dropping rapidly. The 148 hospitalized, 31 ICU patients, 14 on ventilators. And this week from Henry Ford Health System, 52 inpatients, 10 in the ICU, 4 ventilated, continuing to drop. So all great news. We're just tracking this to be complete as we've been tracking this for the last couple of years, just to complete the record. So when someday we look back at this, we can remember how it all went down. But with that great news, things are opening up. Travel is starting to happen. People are going places. Meetings are starting to happen once again. And that brings us to our first guest today, who is Mark Ignash, who is the Sector Development Director for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, or MEDC. And Mark joins us today. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Gene. Appreciate it.
It's good to have you here. I guess we're not going to call it a field trip, but it sounds like people are getting out and going places, and you guys are facilitating a Michigan delegation to a MedTech convention.
Yes, that is absolutely true. And what we do know is that business is it is picking up. Folks are getting out more, and true to our mission of trying to enhance the more and better jobs in state, we want to facilitate that business and increase sales for our Michigan economy. So that's a piece of what this is all about.
That's awesome. I think you've got a presentation that maybe you'll share with us just about what this opportunity is, and maybe a few more words about MEDC and what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. Here, so let me share this with you.
Yep. Sounds like we just need you to flip your screen there, Mark. There we go. Perfect.
All right. Yeah. So really quick, just again, I'm Mark Ignash, Sector Development Director here at the MEDC on our market development team. And high level for those that may not be aware, so the Michigan Economic Development Corporation functions somewhat as the State's Department of Commerce. And our one of our key roles is, looking at, business development, community development, and really, marketing the state through the travel campaign that most of was Pure Michigan, and all of that in an effort to, increase the more and better jobs prospects within the state. And we look at that through many projects, programs, and many industry verticals. But that's really our core mission. And today, this topic, this expo and this delegation is really just one tactic that we use to help companies, specifically in the life sciences medical device space, in terms of increasing sales and getting market exposure. And so, on that note, what I'll do is I'll just roll through. This is not a long presentation. I'll roll through kind of what the plan is, what our approach is, which will also help kind of help understand, what the lenses are we look at, because it is a multifaceted mission that we are looking at for this event. So what's this event specifically? And I'll note as well, this is one of several, right? And as most know, you can do events, every day of the week. We strategically scout and identify ones that we think that are most beneficial, both for the state and for our industry. But this is just one of them. And this happens to be the one we're talking about today because this is on BAT. So this event is coming up here pretty quick next month, April 12th through 14th in Anaheim. This show is focused very squarely on the medical device market. But what we do find of interest, and one of the reasons why we did decide to invest in taking a delegation to this show, is that it is co-located with other shows that do touch into the field. So you've got MD&M, which is the medical device specific. There is automation, there are robotics, advanced materials, packaging, and then some of that is food processing as well. And that's all under one house. So you can talk to an automation robotics company, you can talk to a device company, you can talk to a packaging company, materials company, all under one roof, which makes this event fairly unique, and we have found very beneficial for the folks that have attended with us. And what we've got here, prior to COVID, the numbers are always higher, but what we are finding is that even with where we're at, folks that are traveling are finding that these events are bringing significant deal flow, and the folks that are traveling are what we are hearing is more hungry for deals. You see less of the folks at these events that are there without a true mission, and you see a lot of folks there that are looking to really drive deals. So, and you've got, based on what we've seen, that's contract manufacturers of the manufacturing equipment, automation, R&D, medical device components across the board, and the advanced materials side as well. And one other piece that we do also support is the conference session content. A lot of good subject matter experts that attend, a lot of good topics. We have had Michigan companies present and highlight as well what we've got going on in the state, which is all wraps under the umbrella of what we're trying to do here. So our approach to this show specifically, and then the approach that in my role we take for others, and again, my role, so as a sector development director, I look at the overall, my portfolio, life sciences, medical device technology, advanced manufacturing, and tech. In this case, the 30,000 foot view of how do we really do a full court press. If we're going in market, how do we bring everything we have to bear to that event in that market? And so as I'm working with our cross-functional team to execute this event, as you can see here, there's several lenses that we look at to focus on for success. So marketing and perception. Many, whether rightfully or wrongfully so, don't realize the level of life sciences and medical device strength we have in the state. And part of my personal mission, but part of our mission as a team at MEDC is to change that and really market the state and plant our flag and say, we absolutely have capability in the state and you need to be talking to us. A big piece of this is also lowering those barriers for Michigan businesses to engage in the market. And as you'll see in the forthcoming slide, that's why we deploy a pavilion booth. We look at business attraction, foreign direct investment. Of course, there's always that longer term play of, as we find companies that may want to expand in the state, grow jobs in the state, we want to be at that table. The state of Michigan wants to have those conversations. You can't win them all, but you certainly can't win them if you're not at the table. So we have a part of our team that deploys specifically on the attraction front and forging those relationships. We also have mechanisms in place to support export international trade for the companies that are, for the Michigan companies that are in attendance, growth opportunities for the Michigan companies in attendance, and then supply chain opportunities. And The supply chain opportunities is very unique as well, because whether or not we're looking at companies that are expanding out or growing or moving, we are always advocating on behalf of our supply chain. And we're always asking companies, both in state and out of state, what are your needs? What are your gaps? Because in many cases, we can fill those. And we look to, get that deal flow into Michigan. So we do all of these pieces at this show, others as well, but at this show specifically as a part of our mission set. But what folks are probably interested in, and I would say many of the companies and our partners, is our pavilion. So this is our second year deploying a space. The next slide, you'll actually see what we deployed last year, but I wanted to, for this slide, focus on the design for this year, as we have actually doubled our space and capacity based on last year's success at the event. So what we look to do then is we invite companies and partners that would otherwise may not attend or are looking to get some prime exposure at this event, but otherwise, the barrier of the booth space, the booth build, the cost of getting into the event. This event is based on a merit system where your first year as an exhibitor, you get to go. You're literally in the furthest corner. Used to be the basement, so you have to build up to get on main floor. So our space is main floor, front row. It's in a spot where the morning traffic flows. So what the value that we try to bring to companies and folks that join us is, instead of trying to figure out how to get there on your own, let us help you. Let us reduce that barrier and let the companies focus on deal flow and that networking component. So each company that joins us, you'll see in the center of this photo, there's 4 islands. Each island has 2 kiosks. Each company gets a kiosk. The kiosk, it has power, internet. There's a monitor for either scrolling, loop content or presentations. There's space for product and cabinetry and things of that nature within the space as well. And each company and partner then gets that dedicated space. We've also got, as you can see in this photo, what I call hoteling space, high tops chairs, and then on the left side or the right side there's actual space, meeting space. So if you've got inbound customers, companies that these companies are trying to do deals with, come to our space, have a seat. We'll have refreshments. Really looking to make this space a space where deal flow happens and conversation can happen. And again, highlight the fact that Michigan is a strong player in the space, and we should be seen as such when we're out there. So that's kind of the proposition of this space. There is no cost for folks to join us. We're trying to lower these barriers to either entering the market or growing in the market. And then for those that are engaged in export or international trade, we've got programs in place that may be able to reimburse up to 75% of those costs. So again, I'm really trying to find ways to help our industry and our partners get into these markets at events like these in a meaningful way, but in a way that is not cost prohibitive. And then this year, lastly, we are also building in a Michigan reception. So traditionally, there have been 50 to 80 Michigan companies that attend this event. Obviously, not all in our space. In our space, we're trying to get more companies that otherwise may not participate. There's a strong Michigan contingent here. And so this reception is designed, A, to get that group, together, but then B, invite customers out, invite other companies out, other states over. Have that conversation of why Michigan. And the best way to do that is to, get everyone networking. I'll say it, that's, I truly believe in state and our industry, but getting other folks out there having these conversations in a reception environment, you really can't do that any other way than getting those folks all in one space and having conversations. So there'll be refreshments, there'll be hors d'oeuvres, and so that'll be one more piece where we plant our flag on this expo floor and really show that Michigan is in this game, and we are bringing our industry to bear on this sector. So that's kind of what this plan looks like for this year for the space. Last year, so this is just a photo just because I had to, for the sake of the folks that trekked this last year, we had this space last year is approximately half of what we'll have this year. Again, each kiosk had a monitor, folks are doing presentations. We have a big, in the rear there, we'll have it again, massive digital monitor that loops different Michigan assets. We go through the medical mile, really trying to, pull all the stops out and highlighting the why Michigan proposition while we're out of this show and in market. So To that note, we do have some limited space still available. That is certainly open. We would love to hear from any companies and or ecosystem partners that may want to join us. I've got we have a med device at michigan.org inbox that is, admittedly, I check that one. I just have it so I know specifically where to go for these types of correspondence. So feel free to reach out to that box if there's interest in joining us, whether this year or interest in next year. We do these on a multi-year fashion. So I certainly want to hear from anyone that wants to join us either this time around or potentially in the future. We again want to help our partners in our industry get into these markets and grow in these markets. That's really our main mission here for Michigan businesses is to get them again increase sales and new customers. So that's really the high and low of it. I don't want to take too much time here. So that's really the high and low of this specific delegation. So I'll kind of end my dialogue on that. And if there's, Gene, if there's any questions you have or anything I can answer immediately, I'm glad to do so. Otherwise, again, feel free to reach out, meddevice@michigan.org, and or feel free to reach out directly, Gene, if there's a mechanism there to share out my personal email address at work.
Yeah, Mark, that's really, really cool. And I got to say, I mean, having taken our company to these kind of trade shows before, you can't even get in the door with a spot on the floor for less than about $5,000, and it goes up from there. So the fact that that a company that's like maybe a startup or somebody else can get in there and have a kiosk there, that's actually a very, very huge value, because you're not going to get in and do that without paying quite a bit up front. So thank you for making that available. It's really cool. Yeah, if anyone who is listening live has a question, you can raise your hand. If you're in the Zoom room, you can do that, and we can get that question to Mark. But again, the dates April 12th through 14th in Anaheim.
Correct.
Not a bad place to go.
No, certainly not. Certainly not.
Venture out. Okay, let's see. Not seeing any questions here, but oh, do we have one there? I'm sorry, I didn't show up there immediately. Let's see if we can get Ken live here. Ken, can you hear us?
Yes,
Ken
Ken.
Spencer.
Hey, Mark. Thank you very much. Just wondering how many companies have signed up already for this particular event.
Yes, so we are able to max out at 8. We have 6 at the moment, and so actually that's tracking with typically where we're at this point. Usually we have a couple spots at this stage that are open for folks that are kind of a last minute want to jump on this. But yeah, we've got 6 with certainly 2 spaces open that we can fill.
Okay, is there a list of the 6 that have already signed up?
We do track that. That's not something we publish outright. For those that do join us and that commit to joining us, we do have a coordination meeting, and at that point, we make sure all folks know who's going to be there, and we have that type of collaboration up front. But we don't publish that really in advance of the delegation.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple that I'm going to get this word out right away to see if they can, they are interested in signing up.
Absolutely, please do. Absolutely, and again, glad to have those conversations with anyone that's interested.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Ken. And actually, for some reason, I couldn't hear Ken's audio, so I trust we got his question all the way answered there. Yes. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, Mark, we really appreciate having you here, and thank you for arranging this. It's a very novel and good thing, and as venues are opening up again, I can't agree more. I mean, just getting people together and having those conversations, that's how you discover really cool things. You can't discover everything good remotely. You've got to sometimes chew the fat and have that discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again.
Great to have you, Mark. Good to see you. We'll look forward to having you next time.
All right. Thanks, sir.
Well, that's great. As you know, it is market and customer discovery time. Today is going to conclude this series. After this, we're going to be going on to early stage funding, which I know a lot of you are interested in. But in this question of market and customer discovery, we've had a lot of good conversations. We talked, first of all, with Kevin McLeod from C2DX, who's running a mid-stage business, taking products out of a large company, evaluating, is the market still good for this product, and then refreshing them and putting them back on that market. We talked with the folks from MyLead Consulting about their process for helping startups do customer and market discovery, forcing them to think about what their problems and their questions actually are. Last week, we had Jonathan Fay, who leads the I-Core program coming out of the University of Michigan, and he talked to us about their process for market and customer discovery. But today I wanted to get in the trenches with a good friend of ours who's Eric VanMiddendorp, who's the commercialization lead and a lead biomedical engineer from Spectrum Health Innovations. Eric and I have lived sort of parallel lives in this community, doing and developing medical devices. And I know for both of us, the question of market and customer discovery has loomed large in recent years. We've seen many companies that go a long ways and always wish that they had done more to look at this very, very important question. So today I'm joined by Eric VanMiddendorp, Spectrum Health Innovations.
Hey, Gene, thanks for letting me back on the show.
Letting you back on. We were honored to have you the first time, Eric, and we're glad to have you back. And we're looking forward to getting an update on a program that I know you guys are running at Spectrum Health, which we'll talk about at the end, that I think gives some sort of unprecedented access to clinicians. As a large part of this discussion of customer and market discovery, people start to realize, oh, I've actually got to go talk to real users, like the light bulb kind of goes off, and you guys anticipating that are making that possible. So I look forward to getting to that part of our discussion. But why don't you refresh, for the audience that hadn't heard the prior show, refresh for us your role and how you got to where you are and what your passions are in this space.
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, I'm a biomedical engineer, commercialization lead with the innovations team over here at Spectrum Health. It's a pretty fun role. I focus on new product development and really developing with our team all the ideas and for new medical devices or technologies from our clinicians here at Spectrum Health. I got here partly out of luck and just being in the right place at the right time. I was a student at Grand Valley State University going through their engineering program, always had an interest in the medical field. I've just always wanted to go somewhere where I can really make a measurable impact that I can see from my work, on people or on patients. And so always positioned my projects that I worked on towards that field. And then was fortunate enough through a grant between Grand Valley State University and GR Kern at the time at Spectrum Health to bring on an entrepreneur in residence, a biomedical engineering student, and also a business student to really start building that process at Spectrum. And I was able to grow that into a position there. And I've been there for about 6 or 7 years now.
Yeah, it's awesome. We've seen some of the projects that you've worked on, and always really, really high quality stuff. You guys are doing things the right way, and it's always been a pleasure to get to observe from afar. Well, and you and I have both, as I alluded to earlier, you and I have both seen many projects. I think in a previous week with one of my guests, we said no one has ever said that they wished they thought that they did too much customer and market discovery. And I know you and I have both felt that way in our careers when it comes to customer and market discovery and usability and topics like that, which involves talking to real people and real users. And I guess as we start out, and if you just sort of reflect back over any number of projects that you've encountered, who should we be talking to? We're listening now as the startup founder or somebody who says, I've got a cool product or service that I want to bring to market in the medtech space. Who should I be talking to? Who should these conversations be with?
Yeah, and that's a big question. And I'm sure they touched on this when they went over the I-Core program, where they have some great programming materials around this. But it really comes down to as many people as you can and focusing not on just the user. I think that's the most important thing, is trying to understand who are all of the stakeholders and making sure you speak to as many of each of them as possible. And so what our team has started doing whenever we get a new project in, we've gone through the initial assessment and see a good opportunity there, is we go straight to a process map. And so that shows you everybody who's going to touch it, from when it gets into the hospital to storage to in use to disposal or cleaning and sterilization. And by building out that process map, you can identify folks that you might not have thought of. For example, if you have some durable medical equipment or piece of electromechanical type solution, you need to look at installation. You need to speak with facilities, software components, speaking with your IT team, and making sure that you get their feedback too, and get it early, because especially from a facilities perspective, their feedback and kind of the impact to, hey, we need to shut down a patient room for a day if this is hardwired versus just go battery powered, is so incredibly valuable.
And this process map, this is, I think, the first time we've heard somebody describe exactly this. What does this look like for you? This is a sequential timeline of who touches the device as it's going through the process?
Yeah, exactly. And so you build it based off of the current process. And so it's easiest to start by just following a competitive product, saying, hey, how do they get in? Who's the main point person for selling this product? Okay, it gets into the healthcare system. Where does it go first? Does it go to the room? Who pulls that? How does it get into near the patient? Who's the first user? How do they interact with it? How does your product or that product interact with other products in the room? How long are they working with it? And just following that as detailed as possible all the way through that process. And by doing that, it builds your own understanding of kind of the life of that clinician, that user, making sure that you understand all the nuances and the interaction effects. Then also it drives your questions for interviews, right? So you can go into the room and with a little bit of an understanding of what they're facing, and really start piecing it apart to understand, okay, we were focused on this problem, but we could also affect this part of the process and this part of the process, and you can build out a more robust solution as you go.
That's really interesting. So the process map for you then becomes almost a starting point to sketch out your understanding of how this device flows and who touches it and who has an interest in it, who's a stakeholder in it perhaps. But that even comes perhaps even before the interview. So then would you change the map as you learn things in the interviews?
Absolutely. We treat it as a living document. And so it drives your understanding at first, builds your interview questions, and then you can use it to identify gaps and understand, are you solving the right problems or enough of them to really make an impact for these users? And we follow that all the way through to a final concept.
It's a really neat concept there, Eric, because I think we've found in our work that having an idea of what you think something looks like is important, so that you can then criticize it. And I mean that in the best way, constructively criticize it. And so it's neat because that process map is turning into that document that you put forward, look at, do some interviews, and find out, do I really understand what this process is? And then, of course, anyone who's been listening to this series knows what focus is being put these days on actually getting out there and talking to customers. I think Jonathan's comment last week was that when it comes to sort of that what you can do at your desk, reading market reports and stuff like that, that can confirm what you're hearing from individual users, but you got to get out there and talk to them. And I think maybe 10 years ago, people were very focused on like, oh, I did some customer and market discovery by reading a report. And now the focus is all getting in that room. And I love your process map, because what you're saying is we're going to sketch that out. We're going to see if that's going to help us to form our questions. And of course, a lot of these questions are not supposed to be, do you like our product, and tell us generically about it, about your space. They need to be more specific, as we've heard in previous weeks. But I guess my question for you is, I got this process map in hand. I think I know who the people are that are touching this device or this service. What should I be thinking about? How should I go into these interviews? What should be sort of on my crib sheet as I'm walking into them? We've heard a lot about what you're not supposed to ask, but I'd like to hear more about, what am I supposed to ask? What are you thinking about when you conduct one of these?
Yeah, good question. We always try to walk in with kind of a hit list of the top questions that we want to have answered. And so, to John's point, starting with a lot of that secondary research, looking at market reports, looking at, in some cases, intellectual property, competitive products, and things that they reference is a great point to start, just to make sure kind of where you want to start the conversation, and making sure that you don't have too many questions, so that you can cover it in the amount of time you have. Especially with clinicians, they're extremely busy, and they will cut you off after that 15 or 30 minutes you might have with them. Whenever we start an interview, we always start with reaffirming the problem. This is what we believe the problem statement is. Do you agree? And if not, why? And we always ask them to be as straightforward as possible and to give us really frank feedback, because it's easy, especially in the Midwest, where you have the West Michigan nice. Oh, yeah, I agree. That's a problem. But then they won't actually give you the hard feedback, which is what you need. So reaffirm the problem, make sure you're all talking about the same thing, and then slowly work through to what are the other products you're using and just understanding their processes as much as possible, focusing on the problem, the benefits that your solution could provide, and then you can get into the details later stage once you have a real concept developed. By going through that way too, you can really answer almost all of your questions without talking specifically about the features of your product, which is great because that allows you to go to companies that you don't have an NDA in place with without having to go through that entire process.
And to understand what the value is that you're actually trying to track down and service here. How close do
Exactly.
you keep it though to the problem as you understand it? How broadly do you explore their world? I remember in a previous discussion, we were sort of admonished, don't just walk in and ask them, hey, so tell me everything about cardiology. Like that's not a good question. Neither is saying, here's my solution, what do you think about it? But when you back off one layer, and I like how you were talking about it, to make sure that I understand the problem that you, clinician, are up against, how much outside of that do you explore? Do you explore some of the boundaries of that, about nearby processes, about nearby staff? Do you keep it right on that topic? How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's best to, use that method of abstraction and always take that one step back. Focus more on describing the setting that you're focusing on versus the specific problem that you're solving. Hey, we're going into the ICU. We're focusing on patients that are on mechanical ventilation. We believe this is the most critical problem for them related to this fleet of products. Do you agree or not? If you can keep it kind of that one step back from what you're actually focused on, that's usually enough. And then hopefully it reaffirms what you've already found. If not, you might learn about a few other nuggets and some additional pieces of value that you can add with your solution. But yeah, don't go too far back because as we all know, people love to complain, especially clinicians nowadays with everything they've been facing. And so you got to have a little bit of scope definition.
And then you still get cut off after your 20 minutes and you didn't get to the questions you really cared about. So that's good. Do you have any contexts where you do talk about your solution in one of these interviews? Is there a point where you'd give yourself permission to talk about the solution?
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully it's been after you've spoken with that same person once already, right? It's best not to treat these interviews as kind of a transaction, a one-time thing. Hey, I'm going to show you this one thing I'll never see again. It's best to get the people excited about it and get them, to be part of the process, part of the experience, and show them, hey, we're trying to solve this problem for you specifically. And keep going back to them. And then you can kind of skip a lot of the earlier stuff because you've already established that. So once we try and build out anywhere from, up to 50 concepts. We try and narrow it down to really 3 key directions before we bring them up to some of our key stakeholders that we go and meet with. And then we try and use, a design thinking methodology or do more of a session where we can get a few people in a room to try and identify, hey, things we like, things we don't like, opportunities to modify, and then combine those 3 in a way where we think we have a really good direction. And so absolutely, it's good to bring them some concepts if possible, because we all know it's best to do it in person. The more you can do to get in the room and especially be in their environment while you do it, if possible, you'll learn so much more and people will be a lot more engaged.
Yeah, the questions can be asked about, hey, what's that? No, how does that work? And really get into it. Well, where does this information go for you? Do you guys have a way that you like to capture this information? Because it's one of the things in medtech development, especially at an early stage. There's the whole, it's in my email somewhere. Hold on, let me find it. Fallacy. But how do you guys think about capturing this information?
Yeah, we try to capture it in 2 ways. And so historically, all we did was we had what we called this project brief. It was basically a business plan on steroids that ended up being 50 to 60 pages per project. And it was great. It captured everything in an insane amount of detail. But nobody read it. It was just too much, right? And so it's good to have something like that you can go back to. But now anytime we do interviews, we try and let's pull out the key 5 takeaways. What are the 5 things that we learned and some next steps based on that information in order to act on that? And then we try and throw that into maybe a slide deck, something that's easily digestible, which is good. Again, you can use it as your pitch deck down the road. It's great to show, hey, all this work we've done, here's a summary of it. Or if you're adding additional people to the team, they can easily get caught up to speed on it too. And so we still have all the detailed notes saved. on our drive somewhere, but we always try to have something quick and digestible we can go back to.
That's a really good point, because you've got to have something that really captures the top of what you learned out of the process. And you said you
Yep.
keep going back to the same people. You're not just looking for breadth. You're apparently also looking for depth of multiple conversations.
Exactly. Yeah, we try and do that whenever possible. It makes your interviews a lot more efficient. They get to know it. And if you can build that excitement about it, what we try and do is we try and build that kind of key stakeholder for us who can actually help us trial it down the road, who can help us, be our spokesperson for this thing. Because then you can start to leverage them to get contacts, let's say outside of Spectrum Health for us outside of our system, or you can add them to an advisory board when you start to launch a new company. So the more you can get people excited about these things, the better. And then you can start reaching out to them kind of offhand or off cycle of the normal interviews too, and just ask for additional feedback, ask a quick question, just get to know them.
Well, I know a lot of products have been invented over the years without the benefit of customer discovery, because somebody said, I think this is needed and I'm going to build this. And the thing that's comforting about living in an echo chamber is there's no one to tell you you're wrong, right? But the minute I talk to another clinician, I might get my idea challenged. And then I talk to two or three, and I might actually have some divergence in opinions. I think we've all experienced that, where maybe the message isn't absolutely consistent. Have you ever experienced this? And what do you do when you start to get different, oh, I didn't think about that, aspects from your questioning of the clinicians?
Yeah, absolutely received that. And I can tell you, we've done the wrong thing more than once. It's natural just to say, oh, that's an outlier. We don't have to worry about that. Oh, this one person seemed hesitant about this. That's okay. That's okay. We'll just ignore that. Overall, they like the product. We'll just move on. That's the wrong attitude, and learn that the hard way. If anyone ever seems hesitant about something, or you get some of that feedback and a concern, or you're starting to get different opinions, you go back to kind of the rule of thumb, go talk to 10 more people. It's make sure you understand why that person's concerned, because maybe it is a big deal and maybe it's not, and kind of what some of the driving factors are for that, and reaffirm it with as many people as you possibly can. And kind of lesson learned from my startup as well, don't focus regionally when you get this feedback. So I used to think coming to Spectrum Health, oh, big healthcare system, right? Lots of people we're speaking with. This is the only voice that matters. That's not true. You need to go to other healthcare systems. You need to go to the east side of the state. You need to go outside of Michigan into other areas, because they're working with different types of patients. You have different size hospitals with different types of resources, and your feedback will vary. And you're probably going to have to talk, if you're starting to get some of these differing points, to another 20 people to actually start to be able to kind of put the data points together and understand exactly what direction you need to go. You're never going to come up with a solution that solves everything for everybody. People are always going to want one extra feature or be concerned about this one thing. You just have to get to a point where you can understand those trends and act on it as good as you can.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And I have to reaffirm what you said about talking to somebody and them saying, well, not so sure about that. And then I'll just say it that way, because you were very honest about your own experience. Yeah, me dismissing that and saying, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to worry about that. And then 6 months later, you look back and you say, oh, that's what they were talking about. And we've had that any number of times, right? It's something that humbles you, and you go, okay, got to listen for those little voices that sometimes are spot on to some adoption question or some usability question that you just didn't really think about at the time. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and especially looking at usability, as an engineer, I used to think, oh, if it functions, if it solves a problem, we're good. Not the case at all, right? It has to be easy to use. These clinicians are so incredibly busy. And so usability is easily as important as the functionality of your product, and if you're solving that problem. And if you ignore those hesitancies, speaking from experience again, you launch your product and then you get it out there, and you're kicking yourself because you're starting to see, again, those trend lines that you could have identified earlier on. And it is a lot more expensive and a lot more difficult to make those changes once you've launched a product.
Get that information early and often. And if you don't understand it, I love your anecdote there, or your rule of thumb if you don't understand it or it's diverging, talk to 10 more people and see if it starts to converge. That's a great thing. And of course, here we're talking primarily about primary discovery or primary research. Secondary research, I mean, there are reports out there, there's all sorts of stuff, but you had a novel one that had not come across my world before. Forums. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, so most people go straight to the literature, which I won't fault. That's where I always go to. It's great for kind of understanding scope of the problem. You can look at their abstract and introductions, which is great, and understand big themes. But you can get a lot more detail if you can find the forums where, let's say, nurses tend to congregate and complain about products. Everybody loves to complain, right? So if you can figure out where they're putting all of that feedback, it's an absolute goldmine. And so you can use that to understand what products they're currently using, what they don't like, some of the problems that those are causing, and leverage that as much as you can. Because again, then you can go in and you kind of speak the language of the users or the key stakeholders that you're meeting with and understand what they're facing. Because you can't get that level of detail from the literature. They're focusing kind of big scale, long-term value analysis and problems.
Yeah, that's such an interesting avenue. How does one go about finding the forums? I mean, you say you got to find them, and I can imagine that they're going to be where they're going to be, but how does one go about, is this something you ask nurses? Like, is there any place where nurses congregate, or how does one dig that up?
Yeah, there's kind of two platforms for those. One, if you have a good contact in the healthcare system, right? Someone that you've gotten to know, a lot of clinical nurse specialists or, at the manager level, there's part of these listservs, which are basically healthcare focused forums where they'll just kind of share information, things they've tried, just between all of these experts. So if you can get access to those, you can even have your clinician friend potentially post a question, say, hey, how are you solving this over in this area, this healthcare system? So that's one avenue. The other one is just go on Google, go on Facebook, find some of these groups and just see what they're doing. There's tons of them, and all varies typically based on specialty. So respiratory therapists have a platform versus nurses have another, and you can learn through those.
That's very cool. Well, you said before, don't just look regionally. You said that can be a mistake too. But it is often our feeling that, the people near me are the people who sort of define things. Can't imagine that there would be other ways of doing things or other ways of existing. But we also tend to focus on billion-dollar markets. And some of that is driven by the investment community because we need a big chunk or at least a small chunk of a big market to be able to justify the investment we're going to make in this. But I think you told me earlier, like maybe thinking about only billion-dollar markets is not the right approach.
Yeah, absolutely. This question of value analysis is so critically important. And it's really changed with the market over the last 6-7 years that I've been at a healthcare system. Most people tend to focus on the big problem. Hey, we're going to solve this issue of ventilator-associated pneumonia for these patients. Hey, we're going to prevent catheter-associated, urinary tract infections. They're big markets, big problems, big dollar signs associated with those. Lots of literature around them, and that's all great, and that's a good place to start. But if you're launching an entirely new device and you're trying to get it into the market, you're going to have data to prove that you're actually affecting those big problems. Now, these problems have many, many different factors, and to show that your product is making a measurable impact on that is going to take probably a clinical trial over 6 months to a year, if not longer. And that is very time consuming, very expensive, and usually not feasible for a startup unless you're going after federal funding. And so what we try and do, and kind of a lesson I've learned with my own endotracheal tube holder that I've been working on, is it's good to have the long-term value, but if you can't prove it right away, you need to pair that with short-term value. I need to be solving an immediate problem for these clinicians that they are facing every single day. So for example, I want to prevent unplanned extubations. Patients are pulling out their breathing tubes, great. But I also want to solve the issues of pressure ulcers that these patients are getting. Now that they're being prone, and due to the aggressive adhesives on these, that is a visible problem that you can still put a dollar amount onto, enough to justify the added expense of your product, let's say. But you don't need a big study to prove it, right? You can go in there, walk in, see it's an issue, and show that your product can adjust it very quickly. And so by pairing short-term value with long-term value, you can have a really good strategy where you can commercialize early and then find a good partner to try and actually measure the big impact and value for the healthcare system. And after you have that, you can really take off.
Yeah, that's really cool. What that also presumes, and I think should be verbalized, is that you are getting access to clinicians in a way that allows you to holistically understand their problems. That if I'm in a space working on a problem solution, there are adjacent things I can solve. And so many times folks will get an idea, but they won't really get themselves embedded with clinicians in such a way that they're understanding it holistically enough that they know that there are pivots available to them in their market and customer discovery, which I think is really cool. It's one of the things I know in my travels around the state and talking to different groups. Like, I'm always trying to say, if you can get in there into a hospital system and explore and understand, your effort is going to be so much more valuable than if you just, even if you've got a clinician on your team and you just talk to them. It's going to be so much more valuable to, as you said, get in the room with them and have the conversations with them over and over again. And actually, I want you to, in just a minute here, I want you to tell us a little bit about how Spectrum's making that part of the process easier for companies. Right before we go to that, though, tell us about competition. That's a part of market and customer discovery. How do you think about looking at your competition when you're thinking of a new product?
Yeah, good question. Customer discovery is, anytime we get a new idea, where I always start. It's one of the easiest ways to reaffirm a problem, to kind of understand, is there even any room to operate here? And you can use all of the resources that they've already pulled together. These competitors have already done all the work for you. It's just a matter of, can you find their information and use it? And so, starting out with that process map and being able to identify those competitors and doing some early interviews is a great place to start. But once you identify them, go on their website. They're almost always going to have literature that they reference. Go back to that literature and you can use it to develop your own value proposition and understand, building out a competitive matrix, what some things do, what they don't do, and really where the opportunity is for additional problems that you could solve and features or benefits that you could add in. And one thing that I like to do that I've been extremely successful with is go and find their salesperson. Find their sales rep. It is their job to sell you on their product and tell you usually more than they should, things that aren't on their website. And so I will find their salespeople. I'll call them up. I'll have a half-hour call with them, and I will get as much information as absolutely possible. And so it helps inform your own direction. And also, depending on your strategy, it could lead to a co-development, right? It could lead to a potential exit partner down the road for your product if you're going a little more tangential to solutions that they have. And so I love to start with competitive analysis.
Yeah, that's an amazing avenue. Michigan's own Jan Garfinkel, who started Arboretum Ventures a few years after this event, she was consulting for a startup that I was working for. I was fresh out of college, and one day we're asking a question around the table, and she just goes, "Hold on," and she picks up the phone, and she calls a sales rep, and 15 minutes later, we've got the answer. And it's like, wow, how did you do that? That was amazing. So it's a very powerful technique, very powerful technique. Well, Eric, these have been great thoughts. I want you to take a few minutes now. We've got 5 or 6 minutes left here. I want you to take us through, you told us a number of months ago about this program that Spectrum is starting, it's Voice of the Customer program. And this is powerful for user needs, for usability. This is powerful for market and customer discovery. Like I said before, I'm always advocating when people can get access to healthcare systems to interact and to learn more. Tell us more about it, and I think you've got a presentation you can share with us.
Absolutely. Let me pull this up here. You guys able to see my screen? Looks like no.
We got a swap that needs to happen, I guess, is what I'm hearing.
Be able to see that now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. And so, yeah, just real quick, a little more about our team and kind of where we came from, so I can tell you about some of the new programs we're launching. Our commercial innovations team recently paired up with our ventures arm, which we're super excited about. And it's allowed us to really shift our focus from previously being focused on inside out innovation, really supporting our clinicians and kind of being an in-house new product development, tech transfer, which is great. And we're still doing that, but now we're also trying to leverage our ventures arm and relationships to focus on outside in innovation. So how do we more quickly address the problems that our clinicians are faced by, and leverage our biggest asset, which is our clinical stakeholders and expertise, to quickly develop solutions to solve some of these problems for our own folks over here. And so we've got a large venture capital fund, about $100 million. And as most of you likely know, we're in the process of a business partnership with Beaumont, which is doubling our size and scope. And we're really excited to leverage that too in some of these efforts. And so we have a few different methods of partnerships that we've been really building as we look at that outside-in innovation. One of which is co-designs and co-development. So how do we partner with these companies? We have our investments and implementation arm, but we have this thing in the middle that really helps support and lead to co-developments, which is what we call our voice of the customer program. And really what that is it's a model where we can partner with these businesses that are developing these products, these startups, who really are having a difficult time getting into the healthcare system now. And we can, in a fee for service or even a shared risk model, if it makes sense, get these people into the healthcare system. And so they can understand the needs, and understand all of the value proposition around their product, and get in front of the right people. And so we identify the right stakeholders, we can set up interviews. And what makes this kind of interesting is we can also do immersion. So we can get you into the OR to see a surgery. We can get you into the patient room to understand really what's going on there. And like I said, being in the environment is so incredibly valuable, and you learn so much more. And so we're looking at really being that, stakeholder arm, subject matter expert arm of these new product development firms anywhere across the, new product development lifecycle up to device testing for voice of customer specifically. So it could be understanding needs requirements all the way through to understanding concepts, or even doing usability testing or things around those to understand, do I have the right solution? And then we're also looking to partner with our research department after that. So kind of opening that up to, hey, not only can we help you understand, are you solving the right problems? Do we have a good solution? But actually being able to test it in our healthcare system through our research and IRB teams, and being able to measure the impact of your product. And so we're super excited about this. It's something that we've been launching over the last 6 months or so. And now with COVID winding down and our staff finally starting to get a breather, we're hoping that we can ramp this up. And really, we just want to partner more with folks.
That's a wonderful opportunity. Tell me, what level of effort would be reasonable for somebody to contact you if they're at? I mean, if someone's thinking about doing a startup, should they be contacting you? If they are midstream, is there a size that it wouldn't make sense to make contact? Are there costs that would be sort of insurmountable unless you were, had at least this much revenues or this much investment? Is there any levels there we should be aware of?
Yeah, good question. To partner with us, it would make most sense if you're a startup. You kind of have some of the right folks around you. You have a direction and kind of understanding of where you want to go and what problem you're trying to solve. Typically we've seen that most of our engagements just high level, between $5,000 and $10,000 to speak with anywhere from 5 to 15 to 20 of our clinical stakeholders here at Spectrum Health. And so if you fit that bill, you can absolutely come and reach out. We have an intake form to help facilitate the conversation too, to see if it makes sense. We're open to a conversation with anyone.
That's awesome. Well, it's a great resource, and I would certainly encourage anyone to get involved. And you may hear from us at some point too, because those are amazing resources to have access to. And so kudos to you for making them available, not keeping them all to yourself. We really appreciate that. That's very cool. Well, this is bringing us, Eric, to the end of our this year's entry anyways in market and customer discovery. I think that means that you get the last word on this topic until we get to 2023, when we'll revisit it again. So in the remaining few seconds that we have together, how would you admonish us as we leave this topic?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for covering this topic. It's incredibly important for people to understand. And thanks for bringing all these great resources. Something I've learned just looking back at your webinars is the incredible amount of resources we have here in Michigan to do this work. And just do everything you can to leverage each of them for their strengths, and just to get in front of as many people as you possibly can.
That's good advice. And like you said, if you don't understand it, talk to 10 more people. I'm going to keep that one with me in the future. Well, Eric, really appreciate having you here. Many successes in all your endeavors. We'll look forward to the next time we have you on the show. I'm sure there'll be something else cool that we'll want to talk about in the coming months. And just really appreciate having you here today.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it, Gene.
Thanks, Eric. Well, and with that, we are within 2 minutes of the top of the hour. We'll give just a second in case there's an event happening that you would like us to know about. We can get that word out to the community. As you know, we'd love to just boost anything that's happening that helps to boost the MedTech community here in Michigan or regionally. And we'll give just a few more seconds for that, looking to see any comments. And not seeing any right at the moment. I just want to thank you for being here on MedTech Crossroads. Next week, an interim week, we'll be talking about FDA updates. There's a whole bunch that's happened in terms of emergency use authorizations, software guidances, and more like that, the de novo process, and more. So we'll be talking about that next week here on MedTech Crossroads. After that, early stage investment. You'll want to be here for that. So thank you for being here today. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.